Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome to Ask Me Anything. I'm Cynthia Hirsch, International President of the Retail Design Institute. I hope that you've enjoyed our series aimed at helping those in our industry find the next step in their careers during these unprecedented times. Tonight, we offer you the opportunity to ask our panel of experts about resumes, portfolios, interviews, networking, and anything else involved in a job search. Before we begin, I'd like to share a few housekeeping notes. First, please join us this Thursday for our first town hall, where we invite you to our table, where we collaborate and talk about the future of the Retail Design Institute. You will be able to join us live and ask questions, or you can submit the questions in advance to info@retaildesigninstitute.org. On Friday, we will present our next CEU course, Explore the Visual Age, a new era of visual literacy and creative democracy for all, presented by Mohawk Group. See the events section on our website to sign up today. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Planet Construction and Madison Ad, for supporting the Retail Design Institute. And now I'd like to introduce tonight's panel. Please welcome our moderator, Genevieve Davis, Senior Director of Existing Store Construction at 7-Eleven. And now for our panelists, the esteemed Winston Wright, Principal of Whispering Loudly, Margot Jacks, Search and Recruitment Consultant for Jacks Company, Maria Tyler, Director of Recruiting and Regional Human Resources Leader at Nelson Worldwide, and Vicki Wiseman, Senior Interior Designer of the Kroger Company. With that, Genevieve, I will turn it over to you to get things started.
Thanks, Cynthia. So first of all, everyone, welcome. I'm excited to be here at the table with you again, Winston, and to welcome Vicki, Maria, and Margot. Figured we would start out today at the beginning, and that our first segment on resumes and some questions that maybe didn't get answered there. Winston, how do you feel, how important is the overall design of the resume versus the content, especially when we're in a creative profession?
That's a really interesting question, Genevieve. To be perfectly honest, and I'll be interested in some other panelists' input on this. I think as a creative, you should have two. The content should be generally the same in both of them. But I think that the point being that I think every creative needs what I call a presentation version of their resume. It could be abbreviated in some way. It could be abridged in some way. But content is king. I've said that every time we've done one of these, this quarter or this year, content is king. And I think that in your, whether it be a chronological resume or whether it be a functional resume or a presentation resume, it has to be full of content. I think for a creative to have this presentation version is a must because it shows some creative skills. It also shows, a little bit of, I'm a nonconformist, which is fine. And it gives you the opportunity to express your own personal brand in a very unique way.
So how would you, if you have two different resumes, how do you know when to use which resume?
You don't. It depends. For me, it depends on the circumstance. If you're using it as a networking tool or an introductory tool, use your presentation version. If you're making the mistake of just like randomly applying for a job, there's a couple of things you have to look for. When you upload a resume to an applicant tracking system, one of two things is going to happen. It's either going to self-populate into a database or it's just going to sit there. If you're given the option and you see that it's just going to sit there, use your presentation version. that means somebody's got to open it up and look at it. If it auto-populates into a database, use your chronological version. And this is one thing that I recommend a lot. If you're writing a cover letter, if you're writing a cover letter where one is not required in the ATS, combine your cover letter with your presentation resume and send it up as one document.
Yeah.
Good call.
I agree with that. And I think also, Winston, when you mentioned the ATS, sometimes there's limits to how big the file can be to upload. So that could be an opportunity to use the more abbreviated version. I think also, just to piggyback off of that, I mean, the balance is really key, because you obviously want to, present your brand and to be eye-catching, because as an employer, as a recruiter, sometimes, I know no one wants to hear it, but it could just be like a matter of minutes that someone may have to review your resume. So you really want to catch them in the first couple minutes and tease them enough to pass them along to the hiring manager. So obviously the content is king and important, but you want to make it eye-catching enough to have them wanting more.
If I may, Maria, statistically, the average time spent on a resume is between 7 and 11 seconds.
Yeah. Okay, you said it, not me, but yeah, you're right.
So, which means format is important, and
Right.
in the chronological version, if that's the way you do it, front page above the fold, just like a newspaper, is your most valuable real estate. That's where you need to put the pictures of dancing women and dancing men and whatever. That's
Don't put any pictures on your resume.
Yeah, I don't know about that,
please
Winston.
don't.
I don't know.
That's where you've got the opportunity to capture your audience. So use that real estate wisely.
I agree.
I also like to use bold words, like my keywords I like to put in bold, so that way your eye goes right to them instead of just a big pile of words. But Vicki, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I agree with all those points. And I also feel that this is where you really need to do the research of the company to kind of tailor your resume, your cover letter, your content to that company. Because I know a lot of companies, seems like some of them are having robots look at resumes. So if it's a company that is more quantitative, make sure that you've got, the right words, what they're looking for, research, again, the company, some of those eye-catching words that'll really make your resume and your content really pop out.
I believe, and this is, so I'm, as a panelist, I'm going to ask a question that I think might help the group. I believe that you should have one resume, two pretty version, regular version. I think you should have one resume that is extremely muscular and address different responsibilities in the job description in your cover letter. I think if you spend your time updating your resume to match a job description, you're going to, that's a whole lot of time.
I agree.
That you're spending. I think your resume needs to be muscular and you address those specifics in your cover letter. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, to customize.
And how do you feel about cover letters? How, if we're spending 6.7 or 6 to 7 seconds on a resume, how many seconds goes to the cover letter?
I don't have that stat. Margot?
I don't have a stat, but what happens is I get an email and then there's a resume attached. So the email has to be appealing enough to get me to open the resume. I mean, I'm as a, I'm not internal, I'm not throwing them through ATS or anything like that. But that first paragraph of the email has to say something about why they're writing me or what they're looking for, or who they are, or where they heard about me or whatever, to get me to open the resume. And then the question about the resume design has to be, if you're in the creative business, you want your presentation to look appropriate, has to be legible. don't, I mean, I go back to the days when, the kids out of RISD would put it in very light 8-point font, and the minute it got Xeroxed, it was gone. So you have to keep those things in mind, and or don't make up some fancy logo or brand yourself in a way that takes all the opportunity to think about you as something other than the daisy that you put in the upper corner or whatever it is.
And the other thing for cover letters, and I equate cover letters and intro emails to Margot's point. To me, those are the same thing. For God's sake, don't start with, "Dear Miss Jacks, I am anxious. I am thrilled to apply for the role of XYZ." Stop it. Be creative in your communication. And I always recommend start out by rubbing their feet. "Hi, Margot. I've heard nothing but great things about you."
She'll open it.
Absolutely. So as a recruiter, if this cover letter comes to you and says, "I love Kroger. I love this company. I love the things you stand for. I love the things you're doing. I love your purpose." Yeah, they're going to open it. When it says, "Hello, I'm so thrilled to apply for this role."
Let's not get into all of the ones I get, because I'm on some LinkedIn list that, I'm another, I get chemical salesmen who think that they're in I've done my due diligence and I want to talk to you about.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point about making a personal connection, because as a hiring manager, it's very easy when someone just sends a generic, "Here's my resume," email, and I'm like, okay, I don't have time for this. Whereas if I see them as a person, my inner guilt kicks in and I'm like, oh, okay, this is, this person's sincere, and I need, I feel guilty if I don't give it enough time.
Right.
So I think
Or they
that's
write the same content, if you have another counterpart, this is the same role as you, and they write the exact same thing. It's like, okay.
Right.
So I have a question. So we've talked a lot about in the actual resume, that we should be not just listing job descriptions, but more highlighting achievements. And I received a question from somebody that if you haven't won Employee of the Year per se, how do you highlight achievements in your resume?
Budget, schedules, clients. You haven't won Employee of the Year, but you, on year 2, were allowed to participate and take over something. Or I participated in the team that rolled out 100 stores last year. I mean, you give them information, details.
What you did, how you did it, and what the outcome was.
Right.
I think that the thing that people miss most in being able to talk about an accomplishment. I was on the team that rolled out 100 stores. Great. Did they roll out on time? Were they on budget? Are they working?
And what did you do?
And what was your involvement?
Right.
What you did, how you did it, and what the outcome was. Outcome is absolutely critical, especially if you're trying to talk about an achievement.
And I want to add to that, because when people are senior managers, they kind of know that they need to report on their ROI. And I think a lot of people who are entering the profession don't think about that, but the more upfront you are, that illustrates that you understand that's what your job is about. It's, even if you're 2 years out of school and you're working on a project, you should maybe take the time to learn and then share what you learned about what that project did, what the strategy was, what the budget was, what the client success was. I mean, if that is relevant to the project, but there's something about adding an understanding of the project as a whole.
Demonstrating business acumen.
Yes.
Yes.
Or whole group acumen, even if you're just a small part of it, somewhere in there.
Mhm.
It's always a fine line because you see people trying to make it sound as if they were responsible for that, which is different from being aware that you were part of a team that was responsible for it.
And when you do that, you get to address one of the competencies that I put in the bucket of place nice with others. You get to talk about how collaborative you are. You get to talk about how influential you are, how good you are at attaining stakeholder buy-in. You get to talk about your interpersonal skills when you were a cog in a giant machine. That's fine, but how did you affect the team? Position yourself so that if that cog goes bad, the machine falls apart. Collaboration, influence, yada yada yada.
I think that a speaker once said, and I was in a presentation, always put a cherry on top. And that's what I think of when I think about, what do I want to put on my resume? I don't want to just say what I did, but how did I go and put that cherry on top? What did I do above and beyond that special? So we talked a lot about resumes. I think one thing that we didn't specifically talk about is, should people be hiring a resume writer, or do we feel like, how do you know if you need a resume writer? What are our thoughts on that?
I'll start. I don't think so. I would say absolutely not, because if you're hiring someone to write your resume, are you going to hire someone then to do the job? And are you going to start, pawning things off on someone else? So I like to see your true, I would like to see you write it, and then it's perfectly fine to have someone look at it or someone review it a
Not
dozen
fine,
times.
necessary.
Yeah, but to have someone do the creative logo, graphic designer, have someone do that for you, I totally not for that. That's just me though.
I don't think you should hire somebody to write your resume. I think that, and we talked about this in the resume writing seminar we did earlier. Nobody knows the content better than you do.
Right.
So if you're gonna hire a resume writer, you're virtually gonna have to brief him or her on the content you want in your resume. Back away from it. Write yourself the brief, then execute against the brief that you've been written. And to Margot's point, share it with as many people, share it with 2, 3, 4 people,
Right.
and get their feedback, because I'm sure you all run across this, acronyms.
Yeah, I think the key is people who are, native English speakers who don't know what you do, who aren't going to fall for the jargon, who are going to say, is everybody, who are really going to pin you down, is everybody going to know what this is? Whether this is, and they're going to know the sentences, and they're going to find the typos, and they're going to look at it structurally to make sure it makes sense separately from content.
Yes, I think you need a proofreader, you need an editor.
Yes,
definitely.
Absolutely. And it's funny that this question came up because I just had a communication with a former retail client earlier today, actually just a few hours ago, and he's looking for a new job. And he said, hey, didn't you know somebody who wrote resumes professionally? What was her name again? And the exact same thing came to my mind was, don't do that. She's a professional resume writer. She's an English grad. She knows nothing about our industry. She knows nothing about construction management within retail. She is not going to know how to craft that for you. It has to be your language, your words, and you have to know it backwards and forwards. So I agree 100%. Have a million people look at your resume and double check it before you send it out, but write it yourself.
I agree. I mean, I could understand if it's as far as a template or just like an organizational structure. You know, some people just freak out when they think of starting a resume from scratch. So, but yeah, no, I agree with you both, all of you 100%. And I think having multiple people review the resume is key.
Yeah, and I know there's a lot of workshops that offer writing skills,
Mhm.
resume writing. So if you are thinking about hiring someone, maybe go the route and see if there's a workshop in your area that you could sign up for and work it out that way.
Or go to YouTube and check out our
Yes.
first edition of this series
That's true.
and watch Winston's presentation over again, because I think that he really nailed it. Genevieve, you were on that panel as well. I think you guys did such a great job at nailing, you know, what should really be on your resume and how to do it right.
I know when I haven't written a resume in years, but I know when I first started out and when I was looking for a job about 10 years ago, I started collecting resumes, seeing which ones that I liked. And then I would just kind of compile them and then kind of pick and choose, you know, what I could pull and then just craft it in my own words. So another route you could take as well.
So now tying into our second event on portfolios, when first of all, how do you know if you need a portfolio? Any advice on that? You know, if you're applying for a more senior level job, or what are your thoughts on that?
I know. Oh, go ahead, Margot.
Well, I was going to say some of it sort of depends on the position that you're applying for. But I think if you're in the creative realm and you're working with a group of people who are delivering projects like stores, and you've been part of that, you should have something to take. These are people who like looking at pictures. I always used to say to you know, working with architects, they are much happier looking at pictures of buildings than they are talking to you. So, and project managers would say, well, I didn't design the building. I go, but you're showing them a building that says you were the project manager. They can see how big it is. They can see the quality of it. They can see the scope of the design, the level of client that you've been working with. So it's not a portfolio that says, I worked out this detail, but it's a portfolio that says, I was involved in this way in the making of this thing that you see in this picture. And you're showing it to people who value that. So yes.
That's a great point.
Always a visual, whether it's like a full, you know, it's not like a junior portfolio where you did all the work and everything like that. But even as you work your way up the ladder, there are projects that you helped make happen that you should be proud of, and you should have a picture of them in your wallet.
And to Margot's point, scope it can be one of those accomplishment things. If you've built a 400,000 square foot store versus opening, 2,000, 3,000 square foot slots in malls, not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you've built 150 of those, take credit for it. That shows scope. If you've built this 500,000 square foot building, to Margot's point, that shows scope and capability. Agree with everything Margot said, 100%.
So when you bring your portfolio, Vicki, what do you recommend as far as presentation? Do you think it's better to walk the interviewer through your portfolio, or should you take more of a self-guided approach where you let them flip through?
I would like to have them guide me through it, just because I think that also helps with presentation skills. I kind of get a feel for, how they react to questions and just how they take it from start to finish. And we don't have to spend a lot of time on, the portfolio, just because I just I like to get to know them a little bit more. It seems like a lot of the portfolios that I do review are they're based off a school project. So they all kind of look the same. Maybe a little bit of a twist to it. So if you're reviewing, say 2015, it kind of gets old, kind of seeing the same projects just because they're, from the same school. So, but again, I like to have the candidate walk me through it so I get a better feel for how they react and how they would present themselves. So,
Well, I think this is like something we probably said when talking about interviews, is you imagine the person interviewing you is imagining you talking to a client. So it's your conversation, it's how you talk about what you do, and it's how you pitch, which is talking to a project. So,
And I say here's an opportunity to hire somebody. And that is a video content producer, and do a 30-second or 60-second sizzle reel about your work. Show it to them on their phone, their laptop, their tablet. Send it to them up front. This is where you hire somebody. Do a 30-second sizzle that includes your work. Then I think, to everybody's point, I think you walk them through it at the point of presentation, whether it's electronic or whether it's on paper.
yeah, I'm a little bit old fashioned. I like to see it PDF or on paper, just because,
I agree.
firewall, especially with our work, we have so many firewalls, and a lot of times they won't come through, or if they send it on a USB, I have to have a passcode, and it's just,
You can
Yeah.
post it,
18 by 20 foot with the little tiles that were always falling off.
yeah.
you can post it on Vimeo or YouTube, password protected.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That brings up a good point, though. I mean, I always make the suggestion, if you are bringing the digital portfolio, is to bring the laptop or the iPad with
Oh, yeah.
you. Because I know in our office, there's certain rooms that are equipped for that and some that aren't. And sometimes, you get bumped from room to room. So just making sure you have, as a candidate, everything you need to present your best. And I agree with you too, Vicky. I mean, I love to see a hard copy and touch and feel it and pass it around. But I know that that's not always,
Yeah.
feasible too, but.
I had a client once who was a very, very creative hospitality design studio. They did some retail. And she said, well, we always ask our juniors particularly to come in with a shopping bag full of all the samples that they worked with,
Oh, boy.
But it was always about the touch and feel. I mean, I
Right.
think we're talking about doing things virtually and all the work that's being done online instead of on a drawing board and in the library, but we're still working with materials. So absolutely, at a certain point, materials is what it's about.
Mhm.
And that just gave me an idea, Margot, that even if you're having a virtual interview, you could always send them a copy of your hard copy of your portfolio if you wanted to, so that as they're talking to you virtually, they could be flipping through it.
Best portfolio I ever got was from a package designer who sent me the bottle of brandy that he'd done the label for.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's brilliant.
That-
How could
He's now the executive creative officer at Wyden and Kennedy or something like
how,
that.
how can you not love that?
Wasn't brandy, it was bourbon. I'm sorry, but still was
Even better.
it was a hard cut. It was and he'd made the box. I mean, he really crafted the whole thing. I sort of miss those days.
What was his portfolio printed on the inside of the box?
I don't think so, but it might have been folded in as part of it. But
See, I would have made the box collapsible and have my resume printed on the inside of the box. That is brilliant.
That is.
it was lovely. It was lovely. Anyway,
Great ideas. So something that we haven't touched on before is the research, the networking. How do you get to the point where you're going to be sending your portfolio or sharing your portfolio and sending your resume? So Margot, how do you recommend people connect with and build relationships with recruiters, and what would you say would be, and maybe Maria can weigh into this, some of the differences between working with an internal recruiter versus an external recruiter? But Margot, if you could start with that.
Yeah, let's start. I mean, just to be clear to everybody out there, it's like, I am an external recruiter, and what you need to understand about working with an external recruiter is that we get paid when one of our clients hires you. So the first goal in my head is, I have a client who's asked me either for something very specific, or I have a relationship with a firm where I've got a sort of general sense of their strategic feeling and the kinds of people that they want me to keep a lookout for. And then when I've got that opportunity, I go look at, I start with the people I've met, and the people I've talked to, and the people I've heard from, and then the people they recommend, and then the people that I just read about online. So rule number one is, if a recruiter calls you, answer the phone. And don't,
Commercial. Yeah.
but I mean, how many times I've written this and somebody says, oh, that's interesting, but I'm not looking. They get put in a different pile from the people who say, not sure that's it, but here's what I would like to know about. So my conversations with candidates are much broader than they are if, let's say, they're talking to Maria, because for Maria, they're talking specifically about an opportunity at FRCH, and she's looking for an intermediate interior designer with Revit skills, whatever. I might have a client who's looking for an intermediate designer with Revit skills, but I also tomorrow might have a client with a different set of things. So when I talk to individuals, I try to get through, I ask them kind of like how they got there, and try to understand the sort of key to how they built their career and what is sort of common, you know, how they've made decisions moving from job to job. I tend to work with more senior level people, and what those things have in common. So it's not always about where they are now, but it's about where they want to get to, and how they're going, and all the different things that they've done that they might pull from to get there. And then I've got, like, it's like a buffet for me. You know, I get the whole thing. And then when I have a particular project or opportunity, I narrow in on the parts of what they put on the table that are relevant to that client. And then I work with them on that. And the other thing I'd say about working with recruiters is, I was trained, again, working with clients with very specific needs. I will tell candidates where I'm sending their resume. I'll talk about the firm. I'll let them know what it's about. And, you know, when I send someone, it's because I really believe they're right. So I will be their champion. So don't screw me on that. You know, don't go around me. Don't lie to me. Tell me if you've met the firm, you know, whatever. I need to know to represent you, bona fide candidate. There are a lot of there are other recruiters who are more like, they operate more like temp agencies. They're often like for production people. Sometimes they just collect skill sets and they send them out. That's different. You just have to understand what the recruiter you're working with is going to be doing. They might be, and that's the thing, is they might be sending your resume out willy-nilly without telling you. And if you care about that, then don't give them your resume.
And I think their reputation too. Yeah, as a recruiter. I have a question that, well, I'm trying to think. What, I guess, Margot, I'd be curious to get your perspective on this. What if the candidate wants to speak to an employer, or an employer wants to speak directly to the candidate instead of going through the recruiter? Are you okay with that, or do you encourage that, or do you like to be the one that filters the communication?
I think, yeah, at a certain point, it gets really awkward getting in between.
Yeah, that's why I was gonna. Yeah.
But my relationship with clients is a different thing. It's like I try to spend time with them up front, learning kind of about them and about the culture, about the bigger picture of the studio or whatever it is. You know, what are the, you know, they give me a job description that's a checklist of skill sets. That's not helpful. because I'm selling an opportunity, and the opportunity is to take responsibility for this, or you're going to grow into that or whatever. And I need a good sense of what that is. And because I'm out there selling you to the candidate,
Right.
the same way I'm selling the candidate to you. Once I have made that referral and we have agreed that I have introduced this person to you, often it is a lot easier to pass them off and have you call them, schedule with them, make whatever. But I need to be in that loop. So if you set up an interview, I need to know that interview is going on, because I will call you the next day and say, how did it go?
Right.
So that I have information for the candidate and I have information for myself for the next person I talk to.
So Margot, I have a follow-up question for you, but I want to interrupt for 1 second to say that Cynthia and Gina are going to put out a poll to our attendees here. So be on the lookout for that. You can answer the question, and then we would like to kind of know you and what you're looking for and where you are, so that we can tailor our responses. But Margot, how does somebody go about meeting a recruiter? I personally, a lot of times, have recruiters reach out to me, but when I was more junior in my career, I didn't have that. And I was like, how do I find a recruiter to work with?
Well, it's like you go online and look for people who tell you they're recruiters, or you talk to your colleagues to see if they've talked to recruiters. I mean, how you find us, I don't know. I used to put an ad in the back of ID magazine. My first job as a recruiter was for a woman who was quite notorious, so everybody knew her, and we heard from her. So I mean, a lot of what I do is word of mouth. I mean, I'm a groupie, and so if you talk to people who say, oh, and I hear from people all the time who say, look, I'm trying to figure out what to do, and so told me that you were very helpful. It comes to me by word of mouth. So that's how you find. And then you send me an email that says, so-and-so told me I should talk to you.
So-and-so told me how wonderful you are.
Whatever.
Exactly.
And also, I was going to say, working with me, just respect the fact that I don't always have the answer. I can't, and my job is not to find you a job. My job is to find my client a person. A candidate. Okay, we got mostly execs here, senior level people. Okay.
I want to just quickly add, just jump on one thing Margot said. And also make another comment. When you're talking to a recruiter, remembering that this whole thing is communication, do not hard sell yourself. Be authentic. Talk about it. And I think one of the things that recruiters also want to know, even though it's very hard to do it, where are your gaps? Where are your shortfalls? Where is growth opportunity for you? The one thing that Margot said that I've got to reiterate is, she said, the parts that you bring to the table. This is not about you. This is about what you bring to the table, the skills, the acumen, the proficiencies, the practices that are all influenced.
Attitude. Let's go with attitude.
And attitude.
Definitely.
And they're all influenced by your experience. You bring the knowledge and the proficiency and expertise in selecting particular stone floor coverings because you've spec'd them for 8,463 floors over the past 15 years. It's not about, I've done this. It's about, I bring this to the table as a result of having done it.
So I think what's important to note about working with recruiters is that the recruiter, wants to fill that job, but they also want to help you find a job. Because like Margot says, she gets paid when you get hired. So even if this particular job isn't the right fit for you, building the relationship with the recruiter, and then also like Margot says, she's going to be your champion. So maintaining those relationships, and that kind of goes into more of the general networking that I want to get into. But first, Cynthia is going to share the results of our poll. Cynthia, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I thought I hit unmute. So our first question that we asked you all was, where are you in your career? We had 13% say that they were entry level, 25% are mid-career, and 63% are executive management. And then our second question was, are you actively looking for a new role or opportunity? And 75% of you are actively looking, and 25% are just curious.
Okay.
That's really helpful to know so that we can focus some of our conversation. So going into just networking in general, we always hear how it's so important to maintain our relationships, but how do you, especially now that you can't meet someone for a drink after work, how do you guys personally maintain relationships?
Well,
Maria, do you want to take this one? You haven't answered for a while. I
Yeah,
saw
yeah,
it
yeah.
looked like you were going to say something.
Well, I guess I was just saying, I know it's hard in that kind of new environment, but I think staying connected and by targeting what you want and focusing on that. So say for a candidate, you want a certain employer, you're curious, you're impressed, I would reach out to them directly, whether it's through their website, if there's an opportunity, or even if there's not an opportunity, just to get your name out there and make that connection. I think it's really powerful too if you know others that work for the company as well, and just like we mentioned too with the cover letters or initial reach out, say, hey, I know so and so and they recommended I reach out to you for this opportunity, or I would love to know more. So those really stand out to me as kind of those organic networking without going to an event or grabbing coffee, but just to get your name out there in front of the recruiter.
Yeah, I totally agree, Maria. I even just this platform that we're doing right now is a great way to network. I know, when I was looking for a job, I started to attend anything that was related to my career. If it was just a happy hour or some kind of webinar, just anything. I was pretty desperate, so I would get my name out there, and I even posted probably on LinkedIn too that I was looking if anyone had any feedback or if anyone had any leads, to private message me. So again, just getting your name out there and just have the courage and the confidence to do it. I mean, eventually something will turn up. You just got to be patient. And I always believe that, everything happens for a reason. So your time will come. You just got to be persistent.
And I think you have to be proactive about it. Look, I'm not in love with LinkedIn, but it is what it is. And, all that kind of stuff. If LinkedIn tells you that somebody's birthday is today, if they're in your network and you're not sending them a LinkedIn message that says happy birthday, you need your head examined. If they get a new role and you get a note that says congratulate Margot on 10 years at Jack's Inc., send Margot a note that says congratulations on 10 years owning your own.
I need chocolate.
Oh, owning
Bourbon.
Bourbon.
poached eggs and dry wheat toast, Margot.
Right.
The other thing that I do is I send everybody a calendar New Year card and a lunar New Year card. Everybody, every one of my contacts, I do an email blast and send them a Happy New Year card.
You do it by email. I do it by postcard.
Margot does it by postcard.
Oh.
Well, I will have to give you my address, Margot, and we'll have to
Yeah.
exchange for holiday cards.
Which honestly is
Why I
even
started that.
better.
But I was gonna say, when I have really good conversations with people and we end up saying, well, this isn't right, and I'm sure this happens to you, Maria, you have a great candidate and you just don't have the seat for them at that point in that moment.
Mhm.
I can check in with them every 6 months or something, but I say, look, drop me an email in
Right.
3 months, let me know, or if things change or what's going on, or you're still looking, you've thought about our conversation and you're going to look in a different direction, because that's the other thing I do as a recruiter is I'm a shrink. And don't expect an answer necessarily, but keep me posted. I mean, and I've had clients who, one of my favorite HR people ever to work with, would have great interviews, and she'd go back to people 18 months later to hire them. I mean, she'd go find them.
Mhm.
And that's what I do. I mean, I'm sending out emails right now to people I haven't talked to in 2 or 3 years, just to find out what they're doing and how they're going to fit into what I see coming into my pipeline. And I can base that on the fact that I had a really good conversation with them, and I kind of know psychically where they are. It's not about their skill set 3 years later, but it's they were headed this direction. They're a good manager. They wanted to get into this part of the industry. Did they do that? I mean, so our job is to keep track. Their job is to keep us informed.
Yeah.
Very
So we
well
have a
said.
question that came through, our first question of the evening. Justin has asked us, he mentioned that, we've talked in the past about attitude and authenticity and potential being really important. And as far as technical skills, that's sometimes trainable. I think I specifically had talked about how I have some people on my team who have come over from operations, and we've trained them in construction, and they've turned out two of those people have actually been on our team for many years and are now senior managers. But Justin is asking, how do you get through the application process if your resume experience doesn't necessarily match where you want to be going? He's asking, is networking the key there? And Maria, what do you think from your perspective? If you see a resume with maybe a really authentic cover letter, are you going to pass it on, or what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, like we talked about before, what is it, Winston, like 7 seconds of looking at a review of the resume? So, I mean, I think if maybe the resume doesn't fully capture the attitude or authenticity or the passion, I always think that networking is your next go-to, and to reach out to them directly, kind of how I mentioned before, or make those connections to someone internally, or maybe on LinkedIn, you see that there's a connection between the recruiter and someone and hope for that, ask for that introduction. Because that will go a long way. Because if there's ever a time where hiring managers or myself were on the fence with the candidate, certainly it'll take me over the fence if that person has reached out to me personally. And I would, without hesitation, push their resume forward.
Vicki, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I also think maybe just a job shadow. I know there's plenty of companies that if you're interested, and you just say, hey, I'm looking and I wouldn't mind just job shadowing you if it is construction, because there's so much construction going on right now that, they may be willing to say, yeah, come on and take a look and talk to whoever and kind of go from there.
I think that in that instance, you're taking a chance on that person because they don't have the proven experience. And in order for me personally to take a chance on somebody, it has to be someone who comes highly recommended by somebody that I trust, somebody that maybe I've known on the periphery. And, there's got to be some trust there and really confidence that even though this person doesn't have this particular skill set, I know that this skill set you can learn, whereas maybe it's people management. They're a fantastic people manager, but they're maybe not a subject matter expert, or, there could be a lot of different things. But I think that whenever you're willing to take a chance on somebody, you're really looking for some personal recommendations, right, or personal connection. So absolutely networking.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I just want to point out really quick, I'm not sure if we even mentioned this in the beginning, Genevieve. If you want to ask your questions live on camera with our panelists, raise your hand, and we can bring you on screen to ask your questions directly, if you'd like, as opposed to just a chat bar. Justin, I was looking for a way to ask you if you wanted to do that, but I didn't see a way to send a message to just you. So to all of our attendees, please raise your hand if you would like to be brought on screen. Otherwise, feel free to continue using the Q&A button at the bottom. Sorry, go ahead, Genevieve.
So as you're applying to jobs, what do we recommend as, what websites do you recommend people checking? Do you go directly to company websites? Do you look on LinkedIn? Where would you recommend and direct people to go?
I think it depends what they're looking for too. I mean, if it's a targeted, you want to work for that company, I would recommend going to that website, the company's website. But if you're wanting to see the design firms within Seattle or a specific city, then LinkedIn, I think, is probably the best option that I would think right now. And then probably in addition to that would be any niche sites that would specialize in interior design or architecture, graphic design, that
RDI.
Yeah, RDI for sure. But yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Is there any benefit to applying on a company website versus a third-party website? Do all the resumes go to the same place, or are they filtered differently?
It depends on the ATS that the company has set up. For us, the benefit really is that you kind of bypass all the kind of in between that comes with an auto feed or a carrier connect between the recruiting platform and the ATS. So, and that's just kind of like back of the house stuff for the HR team. But no, there's not a huge benefit, but it kind of just takes you directly to the site.
And so now with a kind of networking question. So say I see an opening at Kroger, and I want to apply. Is it appropriate, if I don't know that HR rep, is it appropriate to go on LinkedIn and try to figure out like who's the HR rep, who's the hiring manager, who's somebody on the team, and reach out to those people? Or what's appropriate in that instance?
You could try, but good luck. We get a lot of emails, and a lot of it does go into spam just because of our firewall. So your best bet would probably go onto the website and check out, Kroger.com, see where the jobs are. And then there's a whole slew of jobs. And what's great about our company is we have jobs all over the country. So it's just not here in Cincinnati, we're in all over 37 states. So you could be, say, based here, but you're still working somewhere else because we're virtual. So I think they're kind of moving more towards that platform. So it's a lot more flexible. But with Kroger, yes, you would have to go out to the website and go from there. And then, of course, if there is someone that internally, we can always help push that resume through. I've done that many times before, but it's hard to just get to the HR person because
I personally receive a lot of emails from people who say that they applied to a job at 7-Eleven, and I try to get through. I get a lot of LinkedIn messages, so I don't always get to them, but I do appreciate when people take the initiative to reach out. And if I'm not the hiring manager, I know who is. So I'll always, regardless of if I think it's a great resume or not, I will forward it over to the hiring manager and let them know that this person had the guts to, reach out to me directly on LinkedIn. So in my opinion, it doesn't hurt. And it's just another opportunity to get your foot in the door and make a connection.
I think everybody gets a Hail Mary. Absolutely. I think everybody gets a Hail Mary. I'm gonna throw a monkey wrench in this. There's a statistic out there that says about 65% of available roles, this is not necessarily germane to this group, this is jobs across the country. 65% of available roles are not posted on websites or either the person who was supposed to take that role down didn't take it down off the website, or they didn't check the box in the ATS that says, once this has gone through the cycle, take this down off the website. That propagates the black hole theory that I'm applying for this job and it goes into space. I don't know what happens on the backside of an ATS if a role doesn't exist. Sometimes you get a message that says, thanks for spending the last 45 minutes or an hour filling out this application, but we're no longer accepting applications for this role. Then why is it up there? I think if you see a job on a company website or it comes through a feed or something, use your network, do everything you can to validate that role, then start your process. And the other thing that I think is really important is that if you've got a contact in that organization, and I'll throw this at Vicki. Vicki, what's the employee incentive for referrals at Kroger?
There isn't one.
Yeah, we don't have one either.
So,
No, I wish.
so that's the point. Some companies do, but there also may be a process that says, and this is a little bit to Genevieve's point, if you do you get referred and then apply, or do you apply and then get referred? What's the best practice that company is doing? And to Genevieve's point, if somebody reaches out to me somewhere in the hierarchy, they're going to get preference. So if you're validating those roles and doing your research before you just apply for a role, this is when your network becomes invaluable.
Mm-hmm. And I think you can apply and then reach out to somebody, or do it on the same day. I don't think necessarily one has to come before the other, but certainly to get into the systems, you get an interview scheduled, you have to apply through the HR portal.
3 of the largest tech companies in the world, and I know that doesn't have anything to do with this group, but 3 of the largest tech companies in the world, their process is internal referral, then apply. Google, Amazon, and Facebook.
Yep.
Awesome. Interesting. Good to know. So I wanted to talk about interviews. This was a 3rd segment that we had with the group, our most recent one. What research, and I know we talked a little bit about researching the company before your interview. What are your thoughts on, I know I personally, before I go to an interview, I ask who I'm meeting with, what their titles are, and then I look everywhere online. For one job I interviewed for, I found this one guy's college thesis paper and made a mention of it, and he was just like, wow, you really did your research. And I was like, yep. And that, I ended up getting an offer for that job. But what kind of research do you guys recommend doing? How much time do you spend researching? And then how do you also kind of drop into the conversation? Oh, hey, I spent 6 hours researching for this interview because I found, I'm asking really great questions.
I'll start.
Okay.
The research to the individual, I call that being able to pull something together for an icebreaker.
Mm-hmm.
Did you go to an opposing school? Did they go to an Ivy League school? You don't want to sound like you stalk them, but
Right.
But you're interested. Yeah.
no, but if you can find something, especially something that you might have in common,
Mhm.
and use that at the very beginning of the conversation just to break the ice, do that. As far as researching the company, you got to know the basics. Of course, you got to know the basics, but I think you do you scrape back a couple of layers. And I think now it's really important if you can understand where they are from a purpose perspective, from a cultural perspective, and now more than ever from a DEI perspective. But you want to be able to have an intelligent conversation about the company because you want them to think that you want to work for the company. And if you don't know anything about it, okay, prove to me that you want to work here and you don't even know how much revenue we did last year.
Mhm.
I just want to add a little bit, which is if you're working with me, I'm not going to coach you, but I'm going to say, look, you're going to meet with this guy. This is what it doesn't matter what it says here. This is what he's really interested in. Or,
That's great.
you know, a lot of times I'm asked to work on positions where it's about bringing in somebody to start something a little bit new and different. So it's not always easy to look at the company and say they do what they say they want to be doing in the future, which is what you're going to be responsible for. But if you look at what they're doing, you have to figure out how to connect what they're asking you to do to what they do already.
That's a really good observation, Margot.
And it's, you know, so I'm saying, you know, listen to me. If I say, you know, somebody go, you know, by the way, he doesn't like red, don't wear the red tie. You know, it's that simple. I mean, and those things, and I get feedback about after interviews, and we always used to have a joke in the office I used to work with, is too tall, too short, too fat, too thin. No idea what something goes wrong, but if you got a clue that you can piss them off, try not to, you know, there are things. That's a sort of silly
So I guess
thing.
that could be a good, like, say you're from an opposing school, that might be a good icebreaker, or that might be a bad icebreaker, depending how passionate they are about college sports.
You know, I had somebody interviewing for a job in Denver recently, and it was only afterwards that she told me she was learning to sail and realized that Denver was not where she wanted to go. But it's those little pieces of information that are outside, that are about your lifestyle. I mean, I know a guy who got a job with one of the most famous architecture partnerships in New York. They never talked about architecture. They talked about sailing because the senior partner was a sailor.
I think as a candidate too.
You know,
yeah.
he had a certain level of education. He knew what he was doing. I didn't care about that. I wanted to know whether I wanted him in my room all day, you know, in my studio.
I think too, as a candidate, if you can make that connection of what impresses you about the company. So maybe pick a certain project, then it could be highlighted within PR or, you know, website and all the, but like kind of speak to that because, you know, you want to flatter those that you're interviewing with as well and show that interest. And I've seen that go a long way. And then one thing I know I may be jumping ahead a little bit, but one thing that I know stands out to me is after the interview, a thank you note. You would think that happens a lot, but it doesn't. So when it does, yeah. Winston, you shocked? Is that?
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't. So I know, believe it or not.
Like stamp anymore. It's like
No.
I know, but so it really does stand out and just kind of takes you that extra step in the process, or at least acknowledgement.
I always like those personal notes too,
Yeah.
like a handwritten note. I think that kind of goes a long way.
And it's something we said last time, but please do not send the same email to everybody that you interviewed with, because they will share it with the hiring manager,
They do.
and there's
Yep.
nothing worse than you're trying to do something good and it just is not good. That's not good.
And don't start out, dear Vicky, thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely to speak with you about the
Yes.
role of yeah. Find something in the interview that resonated with you, or that resonated with them, or was a point that they were making. Pull it out and start with, you know, Vicky, you mentioned so-and-so in this interview. I've been thinking about that for the past 2 days, and I've got 20 ideas about it. By the way, thanks for spending time on the phone with me.
Mm-hmm. So we have another great question here. David asks us, how do you tackle ageism? Although it's illegal, it's alive and kicking. And this also kind of brought up in my mind, how do you tackle I know when I first started looking for jobs as a new mom, when I was when my kids were younger, I always felt like I had to mention, you know, my husband stays at home, so my kids aren't going to be a distraction for me. And I, even though we say that we are not focusing on that, and I know, you know, Vicky and me and all of us on this call are not. How do you address those things that are, you know, subconsciously, like the red tie comment? What are some of your advice on that?
I told a client recently who is in their late 50s, who wants to work for a few more years, that if it came up, that, well, they included in their cover letter, you need to interview me for this role. If for no other reason, then it's a checkbox on your DEI checklist.
Wow.
They did it. They're in round 4. And they're 58 years old. This is the perfect time to appropriately, professionally, kindly talk about ageism is part of diversity and inclusion, because it is. Have the guts to say it. And I always will say enthusiastic, energetic experience is what you're taking to the table.
Yeah, I think that's key, because I know, you know, we look for enthusiasm. We want someone that's a team player, someone that, even though you may not have the freshest ideas, but you're flexible and you're going to be there on time, and you have a very good work ethic. That's regardless of what age you are. We look for that.
The other things that you can pull in are this experience thing, you know, but that the other thing that you can pull in is the value add. Look, you don't have to teach me how to manage people. You don't have to teach me how to be collaborative. I've been doing that for 20 years. All you have to teach me is the nuances of your company. And because this experience comes with me, I'm a value add. I'm already a leader. I'm already a mentor in the group, because I bring all this with me and can help you solve additional problems other than the specific task you're asking me to do. Now, you don't see that till round 2 or round 3 or round 4, but that's part of the communication.
And because of that experience, if there are opportunities to kind of bring either clients or relationships with you to the next job, I mean, that could speak to that added value, as you mentioned.
Great point.
Yeah.
I also
I think too that, you know, a lot of times when we hire people, we don't necessarily expect them to stay enrolled for the next 10 years. You know, even if you're hiring a young person, you know, I always expect, you know, they'll be here for however long they want to be here, and then they move on to their next opportunity. So to me, it's never, I've never thought that that's an issue. You know, if somebody's 58 and they're going to be retiring in 5 years, I personally just see that add of the experience, the network, and, you know, bringing more to the table.
And I was going to say, you bring that kind of experience in, especially with a lot of the disruption we've had recently. There are a lot of studios out there that I'm seeing that are full of juniors and intermediates, and they don't have a gray hair. I mean, and every studio should have somebody in it who's kind of just checking in. And, you know, that's if that's the role you want to be, you've been through the rest of your career, but you want to be teaching and mentoring people, that's a really good point to make in certain places. No, you know, I don't have all the energy to go, you know, do this, and I can't sit down at the computer keyboard, and I can't do this. But I know how to read the drawings, and I know how to talk to clients, and I know how to schedule a construction. You know, I can do project management, and I can teach these kids how to do that.
Absolutely.
And I can be there as the person they come to get answers without having to kind of poke at the person they were, people don't want to ask the people they report to all the stupid questions. But to have
Exactly.
somebody in the studio who is there to kind of share that knowledge forward is,
I can field all the questions that are going to annoy you because you expect that people are going to know this. I can field all those questions and leave you alone and solve the problem and teach this group of people.
Maria?
Yeah, and that's hard to teach.
I agree with you guys.
Yeah.
That is.
It is really hard to teach that, so.
How do you, one of the questions that we had, and Margot, maybe you'd be the best to answer this, is when you're asked, why are you looking? Why are you leaving your job? I mean, I think we've all experienced a lot of wrong answers to that question. I don't know if we need to go over some of the key don'ts. Don't talk bad about your employer or your boss. But how do you tactfully answer that question?
Ooh, it's a toughie, because they're looking for gossip or they're looking for something. And again, I talk to people who want to get out of a bad situation. So I get all of that downloaded, and you're allowed to tell me that, and I'm not going to share it with somebody. I just say, look, they're in a bad situation. Trust me. But don't get in the habit of saying, this is what I'm not getting, and this is what I'm not getting, and this is what I'm not getting, and I'm unhappy because I have to do this, and I'm unhappy. Don't talk about what you're fleeing or why you're fleeing it. Talk about what you want to accomplish as you build your career through the next phase, and just say quietly, I would like to be able to do this. And it doesn't seem like that opportunity is going to be available where I am. They're top heavy. They're looking at moving in a different direction. And try to be vague. Depending who you're talking to, they may want details. And if you start giving them details, be very careful about what you say. I've had really good candidates lose jobs because they shared confidential information. They thought they were being cool and helpful. The hiring manager looked at him and said, he's doing that to them. He's going to do it to us.
And it's a small world for sure.
A very small world.
Yeah.
And it is a small world, and you're going to leave the room and they're going to call somebody they know who works at the company that you're with. I mean, don't forget this, references, whatever. They're going to network it. So the less said, the better about what's wrong with where you are, unless you can put it into it's not good for me because this is what I want to do. And what I want to do is exactly the job we've been talking about.
But I do think if there's important aspects of the job you're wanting, whether it's location or a certain practice area of design that, like you said, Margot, is not offered, I think that's important to mention. Not harping on all the negatives of your past employer, but I think whenever someone's honest and tells me, without going too much, but tells me maybe what's not working for them, it helps me in my mind know what could work for them here then, and if that would be the right fit.
And I think to Margot's point, just to unpack that a little bit, I think it's framing it around, again, this is what I bring to the table. Don't think I'm going to have the opportunity, and this is a skill I've got. It's a competency or a proficiency that I've got, and I'm ready to lead that kind of a practice, but don't think it's going to happen over here.
I also think it's important to talk about where you want to go. It's like, I want this job because it's going to give me this opportunity. So it's not just I have the skills you want, it's you have the opportunity I want. So that is, I don't know, I don't remember whether you really talked about this in talking about interviewing, but it goes both ways. It's like you have to say, not only you want me, but you have something to offer me that is and this is what I'm hearing and this is what I'm seeing. I mean, it's a combination of.
Margot, that goes right into my next question. And I wanted to hear from you guys. How do you think as an interviewee, you know, you're interviewing that company, how do you tell if it's going to be a good fit, and what kind of questions do you recommend asking?
I would ask what I've been in interviews where this has been really successful and it's really telling, where the candidate asks those that are interviewing what they like about the company, and then, you know, maybe what's a challenge of the position. Because it's really telling when you hear what people love about what they do and who they work with in the company, and see if that's important to you.
Do you train your hiring managers how to answer those questions?
No, I tell I tell them all the don'ts. There's a don't seminar, but no, they're honest in their feedback. Yeah.
I think it's also important to get to know the person too, on a personal level, just in case maybe that person is your boss, that you feel comfortable in talking to them. I mean, that will really kind of set the tone if you feel it's a good fit, if that person's a good fit for you, and if they're a good fit, just getting to know on a more personal level how open they are and sharing of ideas.
And from an interviewing perspective, it's again, it's this whole notion of doing everything you can to co-pilot a conversation and not be on the wrong side of the table in an interrogation. You want to co-pilot that conversation. And to Vicky's point, I have a very good friend who's president of Wunderman Thompson for the Midwest. And Ian asked 2 questions in an interview. Number 1, tell me about yourself. And the second question he asked in an interview is, what questions do you have for me?
That's huge. Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
I agree with that.
At what point do you inquire about benefits and compensation? Maria, do you usually share that with people and have that conversation before they interview, or is that after they interview?
After they interview, I think is more of where the conversations start, because that's when you've kind of narrowed them down from a pool of candidates. We do offer a benefits summary and overview on our website, but to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, that's held more after the interview itself.
What are your thoughts on, Vicky, like when you're interviewing a candidate as the hiring manager, do you find that people ask you about benefits and compensation, or do folks generally speak with HR about that?
They usually speak with HR. We don't like to cover that just because it gets like a area.
Same here.
That's not my
awkward.
Well, I mean, one of the, it's always a sticky wicket that I get into.
No part of that.
Sorry, it's like when I'm talking to candidates offline, you know, I try to get a sense of where they think they are.
Yeah.
Compensation wise, salary, you know, and it's like salary and then benefits and whatever. And
the whole package.
That and the other thing. And I can get into the nitty gritty and get in between in those negotiations later in the thing. But I'm curious, Maria, you know, so then I'll introduce someone and a client will say to me, what are they thinking about? You can't, the law in New York and probably elsewhere is you can't ask what they're making now, but you can have a sense. Or when a client gives me a job description or a position, I'll really try to get them to tell me what their lower limits are and their upper limits are. And they say, well, let's see what we get. And, you know, then nobody wants to talk about it. But at a certain moment, I guess, you know, then they spend a lot of time together, and then they discover that they really are only paying $60,000 for this job. And the kid that just walked out the door is expecting 75. At that point, everything's broken. How do you keep that from happening, Maria? How do you find out before somebody takes your time that you're on the same ball field?
That's a great question.
Wow, Margot, I love it. No, that is a good question, because that's hard, because you're right. Once it breaks, it kind of breaks down the process. But I do think it's important while salary is obviously a measurement of fit from an internal compensation structure standpoint, it's also as equally as important to make sure that the right person's in the right role. So sometimes I think waiting to have those compensation conversations till after they've met the lead designers, the hiring managers, there's a little bit more flexibility if the salary needs to come up a little bit more than what was initially planned for. So I think, just being open and honest and knowing what expectations they have or where they're interested in going, landing in their next gig, what their thoughts are, and being honest with where we expected the position to be and budgeted for, keeps those conversations going. But I know that there's other ways, like you mentioned, that could also kind of beef up the offer if it gets to that point, that maybe wouldn't just be focused around compensation. There's other things that could factor into
No,
it.
it should be focused only on compensation, but I'm thinking also from a candidate's point of
Yep.
view, especially at the lower levels, they have to arrive having done some research about what their market value is. When a candidate says to me, he says, what should I ask for? I said, or what are they paying? I say, they're paying what they can bill you at.
Mhm.
They should be paying you what they can bill you at. And if they're a good firm, then they will be billing enough to pay you adequately. But you
Right.
need to find out what that is.
And I
And-
think that's a tricky thing too, because like salary.com and a lot of those are self-reported. So sometimes they're pretty skewed in the data that they give out. So yeah, but I think that's a
So,
good.
so then a kid says to me, so what do I say when they ask me how much I want to make? I say, don't answer that question. Ask them what that position, what is the value of that position
Yes.
in their company?
Yes.
Margot, we're on the same wavelength because that was going to be my next question. Is they'll always ask you, what are you looking for? And how, we've all heard whoever throws out a number first loses. How do you avoid giving them a number and getting the range from them? What are some responses to that question? Winston, do you want to answer that? You start talking.
Sure. So number one, I kind of think you need to know what territory you're in somewhere up between round 2 and round 3. You need to know.
They're about to get lowballed,
Yeah. If you've done screener, hiring manager, you need to know how far apart you are. So, sorry, Genevieve, what was the other part of the question?
How do you respond when, because in my experience and where I've worked, usually the HR screener will say, what are you looking to make, before they even push you on to the next level of interviews.
You've got to know your minimums. You've got to know your minimums, and you've also got to know your maximums, and your maximums probably aren't money. You've got to know your minimums, and you've got 3 minimums. You've got rock bottom, food and shelter. You've got essential, food, clothing, shelter, and in 2021, connectivity. Then you've got minimum, and that is, how do you continue the lifestyle that you've been living from your last job? You've got to know your minimums. My recommendation is you decide which minimum is your minimum. You take that, you give yourself 5-7%, and then you take a 12 to 15, maybe 17% range, and you say, my range is X to Y.
It is always helpful to give a range. I
Yeah,
will tell you.
my range is X to Y.
Yeah.
And remember, the range between 60 and 75 is vastly different than the range between 200 and 225. Those are different percentages. So for those of you at the executive level, just kind of keep that in mind. The other thing you have to know is your maximums. Is this going to be a 2-hour commute for me? Is this what am I going to be able to work remotely? What's the deal? And this is true in our part of the country. Sorry. Do you observe summer Fridays? Do you not observe summer Fridays? What are your maximums? Meaning, if this could be the most spectacular job, relocation. Are you willing to relocate for this role? Forget Zoom, forget pandemic, because look, sooner or later, we're all probably going to be back in an office. Are you willing to move for it? And where are you willing to move? Are you willing to move? Are you willing to move to be the VP real estate or VP store construction at $300,000 a year in Omaha, Nebraska?
I think 300 could go a long way in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah.
So.
As they say, you are in Omaha.
But and that's what I'm saying. Yeah, 300 could go a long way in Omaha, and you could probably leave every weekend. But are you okay? And this is, I hope nobody out there is from Omaha.
They're from Omaha.
They're not there anymore.
Are you okay with that? So you need to know your minimums and your maximums.
I think it's important too, especially when you get to the executive level, what is the entire package? Because so much more goes into it than salary. You've got LTI, you've got deferred comp, you've got, stock options, whatever. I mean, there's so many different things that you can get. And then what are what is negotiable? What I always like to think everything's negotiable, but
everything.
What are some things like, signing bonus, PTO, what are things that people can ask for? If the salary isn't where they want it to be, how can they compensate for that?
I always start with health insurance. If you have a spouse, are you covered on their health insurance, or are you covering the health insurance? I always start with health insurance. Plus, one of the things that some companies are doing is as an incentive to get good people is they're paying for your health care 100%, and they're paying 50% for your dependents. I always start with health care.
This is not happening in design offices.
No.
Okay, I'm
just saying it's happening. It may be happening in the brand company.
I also feel like healthcare isn't something that the hiring manager has power to negotiate, because it's usually a company-wide policy.
Yeah, it's pretty tied to the connected. Yeah, if they're self-funded. I mean, yeah, those are a little hard.
And also, bonus percentages is also not negotiable.
All I'm saying is know what it is.
Yeah.
So that if healthcare, based on, if this is a low salary and healthcare is going to be a burden on that salary, can you say, I've got to support all of these other people and I need more money to cover?
I see. Yeah. Okay.
Because the base is lower than I want it to be.
And it becomes an added benefit rather than part of your salary. It becomes some other kind of a payoff. The other thing, the easy thing to negotiate up to a point is things like salary, is vacations and paid time off. And it just gets a little tricky if it's the kind of organization that is looking for equity. And if it wants everybody in their office to sort of feel equal and happy, bringing in somebody and giving them a third week off when everybody else is at 10 days, everybody gets a little squidgy about that. Same thing with bonus. No, they don't want to promise a bonus, but they might up the bonus potential or the percentage. It depends how strictly the lines are drawn in their comp packages internally. If you're at this level, then that.
I would also be, when they throw out a bonus percentage, I always ask, how many out of the last 5 years did you hit 100% bonus? Because they could promise you 100% bonus, but if they've never paid out bonus to anybody, that doesn't help at all.
Yeah, I would say it doesn't hurt to negotiate at all. Over 10 years of kind of being in the recruiting in the position, I've noticed this shift, and I mentioned this with the panel when we were kind of running through this, was that, you know, previously men were the ones that were driving the majority of the negotiations when it came to the offer. They were always coming back with, you know, changes to salary, but and not so much women. But now, probably over the last year or two, it's been pretty much an opposite shift that I've experienced, where women are really leading the negotiation, and it's kind of now expected that there would be further communications around compensation.
I think also in some areas, for example, on my team, we're negotiating with contractors. So
Mhm.
that negotiation is another element of, you know, if you're a good negotiator, that's going to help you on the job.
Yep.
That's a great point.
Agree.
What other, does anybody else from our audience have any questions? The questions that we've gotten have been so great so far. So if you do, please raise your hand. And anything else that I missed to our panelists? Do you think we have any other topics that we should be covering?
Network, network, network.
Agree. Flexible. Don't get
Yeah, and-
discouraged.
And something that, you know, came up a little earlier, going back and forth with Winston's emails, Margot's postcards. I am such a believer in handwritten notes when you can. It really sets you aside from everybody else. Yes, you can, post office can take some time. So you should definitely send that email, but then follow up with a handwritten note. And just, again, you know, that sincere thank you for your time. And I look forward to hearing from you. It goes a long way.
Address. I can't tell you how many times I go on a website and can't find a city that the goddamn company is in.
That's true. That's true. When
And-
you can, when you
and,
can.
and I disagree with looking forward to hearing back from you. I say you say, when will I be hearing back from you?
Yes, be persistent.
And I think that should be an answer you get before you even leave the interview too, is knowing
Yeah.
when.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree
Yeah.
with that, Maria.
That could be, you know, that's a great question to say, hey, I'm really interested in this job. When can I expect to hear more? What's the process like?
Or, yeah, what happens next?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what are the next steps?
And then no matter how good your conversation is, the person you're interviewing says, well, we're seeing a lot of people and then we're going to get together next week and then we should have an answer. And, you know, it's urgent and you know you had a great interview and they don't want to tell you that because there's a whole group thing. And you
Yeah.
say, you know, when do you think you will know what you want, you know, if we are going to talk again? And then, you know, the day or two after that, you are free to follow up.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Also, don't get discouraged by if you're, you know, looking for a job, especially at a firm. Firms oftentimes have offices all over the place. And Maria, I know you can testify to this with Nelson Worldwide. You guys have offices everywhere. So oftentimes when you're interviewing with a firm, you'll start with a phone call where you'll talk to 3 people on one phone call. And then they say, okay, well, that was great. Now we want you to talk to these other 3 people. And then they say, okay, well, that was great. Now come into the New York City office and meet with the 2 people there. Oh, okay. Now we want to fly you to our headquarters to come and talk to these people. And all of that takes a little time. It is unfortunate. I've had in the past where I interviewed 6 or 7 times with the same company, all different people every single time. And that process took about 6 months.
Yeah.
You know, and it's frustrating. But at the same time, oftentimes they're not in as much of a rush as you are. So, you know, keep your options open, but don't count out a firm just because it seems like they're dragging their feet and taking forever, because that's not necessarily the case.
You just sprung something in my head, which we didn't talk about, which is always be looking. When I say answer the phone, don't tell me you're not looking, listen to what the next opportunity might be.
That's great advice.
How good you are. And, somebody says, every year, do a kind of self-assessment and, your career is a business and you need to project out what you want to be doing. And can you do it where you are, or keep your ears open in other conversations? Or if somebody calls you and says, I want to talk to you about this opportunity, you can say fairly, I'm not looking, but that sounds intriguing enough that I'm going to come talk to you.
That is great advice, Margot.
Wait, there was a follow-on to that, but that's good enough, which is always be looking, which is.
I think what Cynthia said about, some interview process took 6 months. I mean, be persistent, be confident, hang in there. I was flown out 2 times for a company for 2 in-person interviews and did not get the job. I was devastated. But you know what? Everything happens and you can move forward from it. And the next opportunity is going to be the right opportunity for you. So
Yeah,
just
like
maintain
never-
your positivity.
I always say, if somebody wants to talk to you, talk to them.
Absolutely.
If they're
I say
asking you
that
to come
look
out
at,
and see them, you don't know how that's going to go.
Mhm.
It's on their dime and their invitation. Find a way to go see them.
absolutely. Every opportunity you have to meet with people, to talk to people about what's going on, what opportunities they have, it's almost like a practice session too. You can find out a couple of things. You can find out what's out there, and what current companies are looking for, whether you're looking or not. But also it's kind of like practice, so that in 2 years, if you are looking, you're already comfortable talking about yourself and talking about what you're looking for, and so forth. So
And you
it's-
make
it's like-
connections too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
connections and practicing.
You
I
had,
hired a woman here who I had interviewed for a job at my last company.
I'm going to say you've also taken the event, you have just met someone who's going to remember you when someone like me calls and says, do you know anybody who'd be really good for this? Or, what used to happen in New York, all the kids would come out of school and they'd meet one office, and that office didn't want them, but they knew that Charlie down the, Charlie upstairs or somebody else, they'd pass them along. So if you make a good impression, even if somebody doesn't have a seat for you, they're going to remember you. So that's why you have that conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And
And
absolutely.
also, as well, they can make a seat for you
Yeah.
if you make a good impression.
Yep.
There are times where you may not fit exactly what they're looking for,
That
but you made such an impression. They could see your work ethic, they could see your determination and your drive, and they say, you know what, I want that on my team.
Mhm.
I'm going to find a place for you.
depends on the level, but yes, absolutely. Where that's possible. But
Definitely, if somebody like you said, if somebody wants to talk to you, talk to them. I was working in luxury fashion retail and got a call from a discount grocer in Jacksonville, Florida, of all places, going from New York, and not quite as bad as Omaha, Nebraska, but not super cool either. And it wound up, I went and talked to them, and it wound up being like a huge break for me in my career. So I, just can personally, anecdotally attest that things happen in the most surprising, places.
yeah,
Yep.
you're inside your bubble and somebody outside sees it from the other direction, and just listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
There you
Well,
go.
I really have appreciated this dialogue. I think that we've covered quite a bit in the past hour and a half or so. And I'm looking forward to future events as well. Cynthia, do you want to close us out?
Absolutely. First, I'd like to say thank you again to newcomers, Vicky and Maria. And you all don't know it, but Margot has been working with the Professional Resources Committee behind the scenes to help bring all of these events to life on a monthly basis. And of course, to our two constants in this series, Genevieve and Winston, thank you again.
You're welcome.
We really value all of the input and insight that you have given to all of our members. I love when I get messages from the members saying, thank you so much, I just found a job. And I've been getting those messages. So to all of you that are watching this, good luck. And we hope to hear from you when you have news to share, to let us know how that has worked. And maybe that'll become a future episode also. So really quick, just as a reminder, we have our town hall happening this Thursday at 12 noon. So sign up to hear what's coming up within the Institute, and also our CEU course. And again, quick thank you to our sponsors, Planet Construction and Madison Ad. And that will be it. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Squares wave.
Bye.
Bye.